Imagine looking at a world map and seeing one color spread across nearly every continent, a color representing a single empire. An empire so vast that people once said the sun never sets on it. That empire was Britain. At its peak, the British Empire controlled nearly a quarter of the world's land and ruled over hundreds of millions of people. From India to Africa, from the Caribbean to North America, from Australia to the Middle East. British ships appeared on distant shores, carrying traders, soldiers, explorers, and eventually rulers. But how did a relatively small island nation manage to control so much of the world? How did they enter these countries? How did they take power? How long did they stay? And perhaps most importantly, what did they take? Tonight, we're uncovering the story of Britain's global empire. A story of trade, conquest, wealth, resistance, and one of the largest transfers of resources in human history. Before Britain became an empire, it was simply a kingdom competing with European rivals. In the 1500s and 1600s, powerful nations such as Spain, Portugal, France, and the Netherlands were already sailing across oceans. Britain wanted a piece of this new world. At first, British merchants arrived as traders. They established ports. They signed agreements. They exchanged goods. But trade often became influence. Influence became military presence. And military presence eventually became control. This pattern would repeat itself across the globe. First came the ships, then came the merchants, then came the soldiers, then came the empire. No colony was more valuable to Britain than India. British influence began in 1600 through the East India Company. Officially, it was just a trading company. Its goal was simple: buy spices, sell goods, make profits. But over time, the company built private armies. These armies sometimes became larger than those of European nations. In 1757, the Battle of Plassey changed everything. The East India Company defeated local rulers and gained enormous political power. Over the next century, Britain expanded its control across the Indian subcontinent. Britain effectively ruled India for nearly 190 years, from major company control in the mid-1700s until independence in 1947. India provided enormous wealth: cotton, tea, silk, spices, opium, precious stones, taxes collected from millions of people. Many historians estimate that trillions of dollars in today's value were transferred from India to Britain during colonial rule. Among the most famous treasures taken was the legendary Koh-i-Noor Diamond, which eventually became part of the British crown jewels. India became known as the jewel in the crown because of its immense economic importance. In the late 1800s, European powers raced to claim African territory. Britain became one of the largest colonial powers on the continent. British-controlled territories included Egypt, Sudan, Kenya, Uganda, Nigeria, Ghana, South Africa, Zimbabwe, Zambia, and many more. How did Britain enter these regions? Sometimes through treaties, sometimes through military campaigns, sometimes through direct conquest. Control often lasted between 50 and 100 years, depending on the territory. Africa provided Britain with gold, diamonds, copper, rubber, ivory, agricultural products, labor. South Africa became especially important after major gold and diamond discoveries. The wealth extracted from African colonies helped fuel British industry and global trade. But colonial rule also reshaped borders, economies, and societies in ways that still affect many countries today. China was never fully colonized by Britain like India, but British influence became enormous. In the 1800s, Britain wanted Chinese goods: tea, silk, porcelain. The problem was that China wanted very few British products in return. Britain responded by exporting opium into China. Millions became addicted. When Chinese authorities attempted to stop the trade, conflict erupted. The Opium Wars followed. Britain's superior naval power forced China into unequal treaties. Hong Kong was ceded to Britain in 1842 and remained under British control until 1997. Britain gained trade privileges, strategic ports, and significant economic influence. Britain established colonies throughout North America. The 13 colonies that would later become the United States were under British control for around 170 years. Britain also controlled Canada for centuries. In the Caribbean, colonies such as Jamaica and Barbados became major sources of wealth. Sugar plantations generated enormous profits, but these profits depended heavily on enslaved labor. Millions of Africans were transported across the Atlantic during the era of the slave trade. The Caribbean became one of the most profitable regions in the British Empire. Sugar was often called white gold. The wealth generated from these colonies helped finance Britain's rise as a global power. Britain claimed Australia in 1788. Initially, it was used as a penal colony. Thousands of convicts were transported there. Over time, settlers expanded across the continent. British rule lasted until Australia gradually gained self-governing status while remaining connected to the Crown. New Zealand became another important colony. British settlement expanded after agreements and conflicts with indigenous Maori communities. Both countries provided agricultural resources, wool, minerals, and strategic naval locations. British influence extended across the Middle East. After World War I, Britain controlled or heavily influenced territories including Iraq, Palestine, Jordan, Kuwait, parts of the Arabian Gulf. Control came through military victories, protectorates, and political agreements. The discovery of oil made the region strategically important. Britain sought secure trade routes and access to energy resources that would power the modern world. Conclusion: 12 to 1300 hours. At its height, the British Empire governed roughly 1/4 of humanity. It stretched across continents, it connected oceans, it transformed economies, and it changed the course of world history. Supporters argue that Britain built railways, ports, legal systems, and institutions. Critics argue that colonial rule extracted enormous wealth, exploited local populations, and reshaped societies for Britain's benefit. The truth is complex. The British Empire left behind both infrastructure and controversy, progress and suffering, development and exploitation. And even today, debates continue over its legacy. But one thing is certain: few empires have ever changed the world on such a massive scale. And few stories remain as controversial as the story of how Britain conquered so much of it. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe for more history mysteries, forgotten empires, and untold stories from the past.